Hey class, this is the last part of chapter 17, and then I'm going to go ahead and record some for chapter 18. You will have a test on this, pretty soon. So in the last slides, we discussed the use of dams. This is more to do with the downside of dams. So the way it works is when you build a dam, there's always going to be some kind of farmland or town that's displaced and submerged. These are the government takes them over under the eminent domain laws. Farmers are paid as little as $150 and as much as what the land is valued. Some of the more famous cases that have happened in terms of using land for a dam building was what we did to the unfortunate tribal people in, when we say tribal, we mean Indian in North Dakota, where they were paid $50 for an acre of land. For 1 acre, they were paid $50. Anytime you put any kind of stress on the land, that obviously causes earthquakes because of shift in tectonic plates. It does block fish migration, but then on the other hand, you can also talk about the delta smelt that actually lives in the reservoir in California, hence not letting water into the, so you can't open the reservoir to let the water out into Central Valley, which is the agriculture base of California. And so there are two sides to the same story. Oh, like always. It also changes a lot of aquatic habitat for native species and all of that stuff. So this is the interesting part, is where it actually reduces spring floods. It reduces spring floods. What do we mean? What is the consequence of this? Anytime there is a flood in the spring, it brings down soil. It brings new soil down because it forms like a sediment. This soil is usually virgin soil, so the magnesium, the chromium, iron, all of this stuff has not been depleted. It usually used to settle down on farmlands. Today, since we have dams, we don't have these spring floods. We don't have, so there's a huge drop in sediment levels, which causes the soil to be depleted. So then you're using, so it's kind of a vicious circle. If you don't have a dam, then you're not controlling the water. If you have a dam, then the soil quality drops. So you're adding more fertilizer to it. And like most of us have to take supplements for certain foods, for certain things like magnesium, chromium, unless you're eating a balanced diet. And the reason for that is that the soil is depleted. So the way plants get their nutrients is from the soil. So the plants itself are lacking in magnesium. Themselves are lacking in chromium. So ultimately it affects your diet. So what we're talking about sedimentation. So that is the basis of sedimentation. Obviously, if you have sedimentation, it actually limits reservoir life because it deposits sand and silt and sand and soil in the bottom, so it raises the basin of the base of the river, lake, whatever. So the amount of water it holds is reduced. So the IPCC is the one that's kind of like, we recently had a conference a month back, talking about shortages. It is one of those places that they get together and they make I wouldn't call it rules or regulations that anybody has to abide by. They are resolutions. The best way to put it is they are slight nudges to governments to actually do something about water conservation. That countries sign on to it. That does not really mean that they will do anything. It is a non-binding resolution. It's a nice vacation. Global water shortages. This is the one I really want to focus on. The two that I want to focus on is China. China has a massive water shortage, and we talked about it in the previous slides, where they are actually diverting water to agriculture. China is one of the largest producers of organic farming. They're also, in terms of cash crops, that's apples and other fruits, apples, bananas, whatever fruits. They are also a big time exporter. So in order to increase their agriculture base, they are diverting water from various rivers and tributaries into agricultural land, which reduces the amount of water available for the urban population. It also, once the water reduces the amount of salinity in the water, we always think that river water does not have any salts. That's not true. There is a certain amount of salt even in river water, not as much as the ocean water, but even in the river water. So as you reduce the amount of water in the rivers, salinity increases. Think about what we talked about in terms of Flint, Michigan. So similar to that. Now, this is a very interesting concept here. The prolonged drought in Syria and Yemen is threatening food supplies. Remember, these slides were made in 2005. By 2010, the Sana'a Basin in Syria, that's the Syria-Yemen Sana'a Basin, actually completely dried up, leading serious problems in agriculture, serious problems with people not having food, not having water, not having jobs, moving to urban areas, looking for all three of them. And now I don't think I have to tell anyone what's happening in Syria and Yemen. Again, one of the things that we've talked about in this class a lot is how climate change actually results in civil unrest, and we are watching this happening. While we concentrate on the fact that it's ISIS and then there's religion and this and that, the underlying factor that nobody is talking about and nobody wants to address because it's not profitable to address, you can't bomb lack of water, is the fact that there is no water in Syria, there is no water in Yemen, which has completely annihilated their agrarian economy. And these countries were very small scale based agrarian economies. A large farm can sustain for a little while without having water, with buying water, but small farms cannot do the same thing. So you cause unemployment, which eventually leads to a lot of people between the age of 18 and 35 sitting idly and wondering what they are going to do. That eventually leads to civil unrest. Would you fight for water? That's interesting. This is another interesting part, Israel and its neighbors. Israel has been having a lot of problems with its neighbors in terms of water because they have used up 100% of their groundwater, and right now in the international councils and stuff like that, there is a charge against Israel for stealing water from its neighbors. They also put in blocks that does not allow, put in like these, remember we were talking about these clay blocks that you can put into the aquifer so that water does not go to other places. There is a huge problem with that, where they've put in these blocks that has stopped water from going into the Palestinian basin. So if you look at all these countries that are suffering from water shortages, each and every one of them is right now in war. Some kind of war, some kind of civil unrest. So that kind of gives you an idea where how bad the water situation is. Gives you the now. I'm not going to expect you to like know all of these things. Just remember the Amazon is in Brazil, Amazon basin is in Brazil, and the basic stuff. Congo, just the first line of it. As long as you remember that, that's fine. I'm not going to expect you to remember all the names. Now, there are a couple of things that we can do by getting by with less water. So the first thing is land banking. A lot of farmers have done this. In the book End of Food, we've talked, there was times when the government has actually paid people to let their farms go and not allow them to not grow anything on that. So that's one of the things that people have done. Again, these are things that work very well for large farmers. They do not work for smaller farmers. You cannot have a family-owned farm that is like that, a person who has 10 acres doing land banking. This is a very interesting concept, and Spain has done a wonderful job of this. In the United States, also, we're doing a great job of this, is where certain parts of the farm that kind of it joins some kind of water basin, usually estuaries, the government pays you to actually flood that land and kind of make it into a temporary wetland. One of the benefits from this is when the land dries up, usually migratory birds go away, even though there might be an estuary next to it, migratory birds go away. So by doing a walking wetland, you're kind of bringing these birds back into the fold, and that allows, and then once after a couple of years, you drain the land and you start growing stuff. You have fresh soil there that has like virgin soil that has all the nutrients that needs to be there. The soil gets a rest. The soil is also waterlogged. So it's a great idea for agriculture, but again, it works very well for large farms, does not work very well for family-owned small farms. Oh, there you go, geese. I think they were able to get almost 50,000 birds back. So the idea is that the birds come back because there's a wetland. They live there, it becomes a path of them. It becomes a course in their migratory path. And then when you drain the land and you put it back into farmland, the water is drained into an estuary. So the birds are kind of, you're tricking the birds to come back. Seeding clouds. I'm going to talk more about this, about seeding clouds in our chapter on climate control. Desalination is another thing that people can do, is by using brackish waters, ocean water, remove the salt from it. It is a great way of doing it, but it is very, very, very expensive. So if one of you discovers a cheaper way of doing it, yay, billionaire. Domestic conservation, that is one of the things that the United States is actually pretty good at this. So we use a lot of bacteria, usually anaerobic bacteria. Anaerobic, you should all remember what anaerobic is, to clean the water. It's not that expensive to clean the water. And then this water is used for usually public gardens and beautification of the city, watering your lawns and stuff like that. This water is called reclamation water, reclaimed water. You might have seen it. I don't know if you see a lot of it in the East Coast, but in the West Coast you see a lot of it. If you go to any park, golf course, anything, they tell you not to drink the water, not to frolic in the grass, because it has all been watered with reclaimed water. That's water from your toilet, water from your bathroom, water from washing the dishes, and all that is purified, cleaned up to an acceptable level. Not good enough for drinking, but to an acceptable level, and then recycled into parks and golf courses and housing developments and all of that stuff. So here are a couple of things that you kind of need to know. That is what are the water laws in our country? In the eastern states and Canada, we have the riparian use law. That is, if you live adjoining to a water body, if there is water on your land, you can use it. You do not have sole property rights on it. However, you can use it to your benefit without paying anyone. If there is a water shortage, if the water is required, if the water needs to be diverted, the government can come in and do it. You do not own the water. However, in the western states, there is prior appropriation rights. If there is water on your land and you can prove that you are using it for beneficial reasons, that is agriculture, industry, and household reasons, you own the water. It is yours to keep. It is yours to do whatever you want with it, as long as you can prove that it is used for beneficial purposes. For example, Nestle has bought the water rights in most of the public parks in California. That is, they can, in Southern California, so they can go into the aquifer there and pull out the water for Nestle water, and you guys can get bottled water. We also have a law that says use it or lose it. So in a national park, if the water is not being used and you're trying to conserve it, you lose rights to it. Very, very short-sighted policy. However, this policy was a result of the gold rush. So when people migrated to the California area, California, Alaska, Colorado, and all those states have the same policy. It was, people who saw the land first staked a claim on it, and if there was water under it, it was theirs. So one of the things that you're going to realize with the with the United States is that we have been really successful in conserving our water, whether it is household education, using reclaimed water, repurposing water.